She smiled, kissed her billionaire mobster fiancé, and served him a plate laced with deadly wolfsbane. For weeks, Elena played the perfect loving bride while systematically destroying his mind and stealing $3, $2 million from an orphanage fund. She thought she had outsmarted the most terrifying crime family in America. But she made one fatal mistake. She let the cook's 8-year-old daughter see her hide the silver spoon. You won't believe the revenge this Mafia Don unleashes when he finally uncovers the truth. Good. Let us pause and really look at this frame together. You and I are staring straight into the belly of the Marchetti estate, standing under crystal chandeliers that throw cold light across 40 of the most dangerous men on earth. Mobsters, corrupt judges, and politicians all sipping expensive red wine, while a slow jazz trumpet tries to drown out the ghosts of their victims. They stand there wrapped in tailored silk, absolutely convinced their money makes them untouchable. But watch the shadows creeping into the corners. Their power is just a gilded cage. The hard truth we all have to face is that absolute control is a shared delusion. It makes you so blind that you never even notice the person smiling. Warmly at your side is the exact one quietly unsheathing the knife. Watch the camera push slowly toward Xavier Marchetti, sitting dead center. He is dressed in pitch black, shoulders rigid, trying to project the terrifying aura of his father. But the true tragedy of this shot sits quietly to his right. Elena Voss is draped in heavy white silk, a massive diamond catching the candlelight when she breathes. Xavier genuinely believes he wears the crown. He has no idea she picked the mournful jazz, arranged the blood-red centerpieces, and curated the delicate salmon resting on his silver plate. The boss of the underworld is just a wooden puppet in her fatal play. The lesson here is deeply humbling. The most devastating traps in our lives are rarely set by our sworn enemies. They are carefully laid by the very hands that pour our drinks. The elegant tension shatters. Heavy oak kitchen doors crash open, and an 8-year-old girl named Sophia skids onto the freezing marble floor. Her tiny fingers choke the neck of a ragged stuffed bear. "Do not eat that, mister," she screams, her voice tearing through the room like broken glass. Watch the absolute paralysis that follows. The jazz trumpet dies. Silver forks hang perfectly still in the dead air. 40 cold-blooded murderers, men who order executions over morning coffee, are instantly paralyzed by a terrified child exposing the poisoned fish. It serves as a stunning reminder of a simple human truth. No matter how towering and thick the walls of a lie might be, they will always crumble to dust the second one brave soul decides to speak the raw truth out loud. Pay close attention to the micro-expressions here. Xavier freezes like a stone gargoyle, though the silver fork in his hand begins to shake. A man consumed by his own ego cannot process sudden vulnerability. But Elena is a completely different breed. She instantly slides into pure survival mode. She glides to her feet, pressing a manicured hand over her chest, and lets out a beautifully measured gasp. "Sophia," she whispers, coating the name in artificial honey. A second later, Maria sprints out of the kitchen. Her apron is smeared with flour and she is wailing, blinded by the terror of what these monsters might do to her baby. The lesson hits hard. Genuine love is always frantic, desperate, and beautifully messy. While a predator's fake affection is always perfectly rehearsed. Stick with me here, because this close-up hinges on one tiny movement. Sophia extends a trembling finger, pointing straight at Elena. "I saw her pour white powder from her purse," she cries. The room instantly erupts into forced, hollow laughter. Just the cook's jealous kid, a sweaty politician chuckles, desperate to maintain their illusion of safety. But look at the far end of the table. Don Lucia is not laughing. She is slowly crushing a wooden rosary between her knuckles. Her dark eyes dart from the child, to Elena, and down to the salmon. She understands the betrayal, and she does not breathe a single word. The lesson is profound. When a crowd laughs loudly to hide their panic, the person who ultimately survives is the one who goes dead silent and simply watches. Watch how Xavier seals his doom. He lowers his silver fork, treating it like an unexploded bomb. He does not turn to his wife or his armed guests. His hollow eyes lock entirely on the shivering little girl. He whispers into the silence, "Are you sure?" The tragedy is profound. A good man would instinctively defend his love, but a king obsessed with power only cares about his bruised ego. Sophia holds her ground, lifting her stuffed bear like a tiny shield to stare defiantly at Elena. Elena begins a slow, predatory walk around the table, basking in the fearful gaze of 40 hardened killers. The lesson is chilling but true. A toxic soul never runs away when caught. They thrive in the chaos, twisting the heavy tension until they become the star of the show. Let us pause the frame right here to study Elena. She drops down, letting her expensive ivory silk dress pool across the cold marble floor. Her smile is a terrifying masterclass in manipulation. She whispers gently, claiming the chef simply added salt. Good, but Sophia refuses to break. With the unblinking stare of a traumatized witness, she swears she saw Elena take the powder from a silver purse. Watch how the dim light catches the sudden twitch in Elena's jaw, a microscopic flash of pure malice. Behind them, Marco steps from the shadows, his brutal loyalty ready to crush a child to protect the family name. It leaves us with a quiet, powerful truth about life. You can drape a deadly lie in the finest silk imaginable. But the raw truth always finds a way to bleed right through the fabric. Watch Marco step into the frame, whispering a fatal trap into Xavier's ear. He murmurs that every guest is watching. If the boss refuses the meal, people will say a child broke his nerve. Xavier's jaw tightens to stone. This is his ultimate tragedy. His empire rests on the fragile foundation of public opinion. To him, this velvet chair is an iron throne, and a king never flinches. Sensing death, Sophia lunges. Desperate to save him, she yanks the porcelain plate against her chest. Thick red sauce spills like blood across her stuffed bear as she screams for him to stop. Her raw desperation shatters the frozen elegance of the room. It brings us to a devastating truth. The ones who love us most deeply are usually the people we blindly push away to protect our own fragile pride. A gasp ripples through the dining hall, a cat chuckles, while a judge's wife hides a smirk. They think this is charming theater, blind to the lethal tragedy unfolding. Xavier rises with the slow gravity of a predator. He softly demands the child look at him and return the food. The girl's lip trembles. She looks so small that Maria lets out a broken whimper like a wounded animal. Xavier ignores the heartbreak. He reaches out, wrapping his hand over the ceramic rim. He does not pull. He merely waits, using his suffocating psychological weight to break her will. It is a chilling frame, leaving us with a stark lesson. The most dangerous people in this world rarely raise their voices. They simply use a dead, freezing patience to slowly tear your boundaries apart. Let us look at this piece by piece together. When her tiny, sauce-stained fingers finally give way, Xavier reclaims the plate with the cold precision of a surgeon. The camera's focus shifts to Don Lucia as he delivers the ultimate test. He quietly orders Xavier to actually listen to the terrified child. But the man's dark pathology has already taken the wheel. To maintain his iron grip on this room, to prove his unquestionable dominance, he feels compelled to prove a little girl wrong. You and I are watching a grand tragedy play out in real time. We are witnessing a proud man blindly seal his own violent fate just to save face. He slowly lifts his chin, perfectly framing himself for his final fatal act, and calmly addresses the crowd. Freeze the frame right here and appreciate this beautiful masterpiece of irony. Xavier plays the flawless gentleman, gently kissing the knuckles of his sociopathic bride, Elena. He even whispers an apology. But biology cares nothing for a man's ego. The poison finally hits. A crystal glass shatters against the marble floor. His knees buckle, and a dark thread of blood drips down his chin. The image that truly breaks your heart, though, is Tony Hawk Russo. 200 pounds of scarred Brooklyn muscle. Leaping on pure instinct to catch the falling body of the only father figure he has ever known. It reveals a brutally harsh truth. We often pour our most fierce, unconditional loyalty into the very people who deserve it the least. Leaving us holding nothing but the broken pieces. Hawk catches Xavier just before he hits the floor, and the illusion of high society evaporates. These polished men instantly devolve into paranoid, trigger-happy thugs. Cold metal flashes under the chandeliers as they lock down the room. But shift your focus to Dr. Salvatore Greco. He does not flinch. He stands, gripping his worn leather bag like a priest holding a Bible. He spent 19 years playing God for this family, trading his soul to be their midnight handyman now. He walks into a crossfire to save a man who's already turning to dust. That is the true, lingering tragedy of this frame. We often spend our entire lives desperately trying to fix other people's toxic messes, only to realize we have locked ourselves inside a cold cage of our own making. Let us freeze the frame right here, you and I, as shadows stretch across the marble. Greco kneels, checking Xavier's fading pulse, muttering about the fast poison, but the true tragedy unfolds under the chandelier. Elena throws her body over her dying fiancé. Letting his blood ruin her silk dress, she sobs violently. Yet, somehow, her hair remains perfectly styled. It is a chilling masterclass in manufactured grief. Beside her stands little Sophia, completely silent. The child's dark eyes reflect a crushing realization. Real monsters do not hide under the bed. They stand right in the living room. This leaves us with a quiet, undeniable truth. The most dangerous people we encounter usually wear the most beautiful masks. We must learn to trust the subtle cracks in a story, rather than the loud theatrical displays meant to blind us. Look closer at who truly holds the power in this frozen room. The adults are completely blinded by the theatrical tears of a trembling bride. Yet, the only soul with clear vision is a terrified little girl. At the head of the heavy oak table sits Donna Lucia, colder than a winter grave, locking down the estate with one flat sentence. Beside her sits a trapped politician, sweating through his tailored suit. He is so paralyzed by fear that he forgets he could simply stand up and run out the door. We teach children to look toward adults for safety and guidance, but in moments of pure chaos, grown-ups can be desperately blind. The lesson here is sharp and simple. Age and status never guarantee wisdom. You have to trust your own raw instincts. Especially when the rest of the crowd chooses to look the exact opposite way. Watch the frantic doctor waving his hands to secure the crime scene before paramedics even arrive. In the shadows, the housekeeper stares at a gold-edged plate, knowing exactly whose mouth that fatal meal was meant for. Then there is Elena. She leans down to press a freezing kiss against the pale forehead of the man she just tried to bury. Watch her eyes. They instantly dart toward the heavy back door. She is terrified. Little Sophia catches that exact frantic glance, matching it to a dark memory from 2 hours ago. It reveals a brutal truth about human nature. You can easily manufacture tears, but you can never fake genuine peace of mind. Guilt is a very heavy, suffocating coat. No matter how elegantly you try to wear it, someone will always notice the tearing seams. A guilty conscience always leaves a trail. The young girl's memory replays with terrifying clarity. Elena pushes a heavy envelope to an enforcer, sealing a dark pact. Before Sophia can process the moment, her mother drags her into the shadows, pressing her spine against the freezing plaster. She desperately tries to fold her child into the architecture of a house ruled by predators. Outside, sirens are cut short by Donna Lucia demanding absolute secrecy, treating the bleeding air like spoiled cargo. You and I might assume that keeping our heads down in dangerous situations will save us. But here is the hard truth. Silence never insulates you from the flames of a burning house. It merely ensures that when the roof inevitably collapses, nobody will be there to hear your cries for help. As the stretcher rattles away, the dying man forces his eyelids open. Sinking into darkness, his vision locks onto the little girl clutching a worn stuffed animal. He offers the faintest tilt of his head. It is a silent transfer of burdens, acknowledging that she alone sees the rot inside their empire. The scene violently cuts to the harsh fluorescent glare of the ward. It is less a medical emergency and more a hostile takeover. Dark sedans block the ambulance bays, while terrified nurses stare at the floorboards, paralyzed by the armed enforcers crowding the halls. This moment exposes the great tragedy of ruling by fear. You can use endless cash and a loaded weapon to purchase immediate obedience, but genuine loyalty is a rare currency that violence can never truly buy. Inside the sterile room, the silence is broken only by a heart monitor and the sharp clack of Donna Lucia rolling rosary beads. She sits rigidly, a flawless monument of authority, perfectly tailored while her own son bleeds out nearby. She is not seeking divine grace. She is using those holy beads to calculate her brutal revenge. Out in the cold hallway, another mother lives a totally different reality. She curves her shaking frame over her daughter, turning her own body into a shield against the creeping poison of this syndicate. One woman commands total fear, while the other possesses nothing. But real power is never about dominating the people around you. True strength is found entirely in what you are willing to sacrifice to keep the people you love safe from the dark. Watch how the power dynamic in this room shifts in a beautifully twisted way. A towering enforcer looms over a terrified mother, treating her like dirt. But then the clicking of those wooden rosary beads stops. Donna Lucia steps into the harsh light. Instantly, the brutal guard backs away like a frightened hound. The matriarch ignores the trembling woman, locking her cold eyes directly onto the little girl. With a single nod, she grants them temporary sanctuary. The mother shakes, deeply aware her life was just spared by the deadliest predator in the building. It is a strange rhythm we all eventually face. We spend our days of frantically running from the shadows, only to discover that sometimes, the darkest wolves are the exact ones we need to shield us from the storm. The mother collapses into a chair, vibrating with panic. A tailored suit rushes up, whispering a grim report about synthetic toxins. Donna Lucia does not flinch. She ignores the news, her dark eyes consumed by the little girl. Silently calculating the value of this tiny witness. Then, the victim's sister steps into the room. Her eyes are rimmed in violent red, Yet her face is a terrifying, emotionless mask. She has been conditioned since birth to lock her humanity away. Good. We so often mistake a blank, hardened face for true resilience. But remember this truth. Simply swallowing your agony does not forge you into iron. It only ensures that your unwept tears will slowly corrode your soul from the inside out. Good. Until absolutely nothing of your true self remains. Good. Notice the absolute precision of the sister in this moment. She drops her knees onto the filthy linoleum, placing herself perfectly at the child's eye level. In one fluid motion, she strips away all the looming authority of the adult world. Good. Her voice drops to a steady hum, building a delicate bridge into the little girl's mind. It works brilliantly. Trapped in shock, the child's brain recorded the evening like a camera. She recites the exact minute on the clock, the shadow in the corner, and how the bride pulled a deadly vial from a silver clutch. It is a profound lesson in human connection. If you ever need someone to hand you their deepest truth, you cannot stand over them with a sword. Good. You must willingly kneel in the dirt and prove you are truly ready to listen. Good. The little girl unwinds the nightmare without shedding a single tear, detailing the poisoned plate, with the chilling detachment of reading a receipt. The atmosphere shifts violently when her voice drops to a breathless whisper. Good. She mentions a second man in the shadows, repeating his exact words. Tonight has to work. The impact is catastrophic. Donna Lucia and her enforcer trade one devastating, silent look. The illusion shatters. This was a meticulously orchestrated assassination. Good. Just then, the exhausted doctor pushes through the doors, looking like a ghost. It is terrifying how one sentence from a child can decapitate an entire empire. It reminds us that while we anxiously guard our lives against loud, roaring threats, the most lethal truths usually hide inside the softest whispers. Good. The doctor looks utterly drained, bringing a rare shred of hope. The victim barely touched the tainted food. Donna Lucia absorbs this without a blink. Then the doctor drops the agonizing hammer. Good. The bloodwork reveals her son was systematically poisoned for 6 weeks. The clicking of the wooden rosary abruptly stops. The matriarch realizes her son slept in the arms of his own executioner. Inside the room, the man claws his way back to consciousness. Good. He wakes tasting sharp metal, tethered to screeching machines, his chest screaming in agony. It twists the knife in your gut. We build massive walls to keep enemies out, blind to a tragic reality. The most devastating betrayals never breach the front door. Good. They are poured directly into our glass by the person sitting right beside us. Good. The wounded man opens his eyes. The first face in the stark light is his mother. She has not slept, choosing to hold the room hostage with her frigid glare. She does not stroke his hair or shed a tear. Instead, she coldly interrogates him, Good, demanding to know why he ignored his instincts about his new bride. The broken man squeezes his eyes shut, drowning in humiliation. He knows his blind heart almost killed him. And how does his mother comfort him? Good. She gathers up his shame and forges it into an iron collar, chaining him to her will forever. We all make catastrophic choices, but remember this. The moment you allow someone to weaponize your regrets to control your future, you are no longer surviving. Good. You are simply trading one dark prison for another. Good. Stick with me, because you and I are about to watch a man's reality shatter. Look at our wounded boss, forcing a hollow laugh before the stabbing agony in his chest chokes it out of him. His enforcer delivers the fatal verdict. Good. 6 long weeks of deliberate poisoning. The boss had convinced himself the crushing fatigue was just the heavy burden of running a syndicate. But the deadliest venom was his own denial. His desperate refusal to admit the woman sleeping beside him was ending his life. Staring at the blank ceiling, the delusion breaks. He asks to see the little girl instantly. His own henchman looks to the matriarch for permission to obey. A quiet, brutal shift in power. It reveals something profoundly human. We only blind ourselves so fiercely, because accepting the naked truth will cost us absolutely everything we have. Good. Let us unpack this scene together, starting right on the cold hospital tiles. Sophia steps into the sterile room barefoot, gripping a worn stuffed bear like a tiny shield. She stops exactly 3 paces from the mattress, calculating the distance to safety with the flat gaze of a veteran. On the bed, Xavier forces his poisoned frame upright. He ignores the frantic doctor, swallowing unimaginable pain just to hold the little girl's eyes. The silence between them is suffocating. In her hypervigilance and stare, the boss finally sees the brutal reflection of his own lethal mistakes. He built a world of paranoia, and she is the tragic result. It brings us to a harsh realization about human nature. The best masters of survival are usually the innocent ones forced to navigate the darkest rooms long before their time. An apex predator never apologizes. That is the rule of the underworld. Yet Xavier looks down at this tiny girl and his voice shatters. He confesses his fatal mistake, begging forgiveness for taking that poisoned plate and forcing her to watch him consume his own death sentence. Seeing this raw regret from a ruthless mobster feels like watching a mountain collapse. But watch Sophia. Not a single tear drops. She just studies his sweating face and calmly asks if his rotting insides are burning. When he whispers yes, her expression stays dead, blank, silently judging it a fair price to pay. Her small hand then pulls a stained, crumpled scrap of paper from her pocket, the poison packet. It serves as a quiet reminder for all of us. Sometimes the fragile people we swear to protect are the very ones holding the terrifying truth we completely refuse to see. Think about the chilling survival instincts of this 8-year-old child. Sophia quietly explains how she dug the torn wrapper out of the trash, the second her stepmother turned her back. She buried the deadly evidence inside a box of dry pasta, hoarding her terrible secret like a captured soldier. The doctor nervously seals the paper in a bag, treating the hospital room like an active crime scene. But focus on the matriarch, Donna Lucia. She glides past the panicked staff, looks down at the little girl, and openly praises her cunning bravery. This is the irreversible tragedy of their bloodline. They reward a child for dancing on the edge of the grave, treating a lethal betrayal like a normal family milestone. The lesson here is undeniable and grim. When any family normalizes pure tragedy, they guarantee the nightmare will never truly end. The heavy doors swing open, and the hallway erupts into chaos before Elaine steps into the frame. This woman directs her life like a dark cinematic masterpiece. She actually took time to change out of her party dress and slip into a funeral-ready black suit before rushing to her dying husband. Bursting into the room, she delivers a flawless, desperate performance of a shattered wife. Her mascara is smudged just enough to suggest weeping, yet meticulously placed to keep her beautiful. It is completely chilling to witness. She uses this theatrical grief to suck the oxygen out of the room and bend everyone to her will. But the truth has a funny way of surfacing. We all eventually learn a simple rule. The loudest, most dramatic person in the room is almost always the one with the darkest secrets to hide. Let's look at this scene together. Watching their body language feels exactly like bracing for a slow-motion car crash. Elena throws her velvet arms around the poisoned leader, expecting him to play the victim in her tragic romance. But Xavier sits there as still as a corpse. His hollow eyes stare right through her with the cold calculation of a predator. You can pinpoint the exact millisecond. Elena feels the control slip away. She starts talking way too fast, desperately blaming her guards. But then, her wild eyes dart into the shadows and lock onto Sophia, the quiet little girl in the corner. Sophia was the one tiny variable she forgot to script. It is funny how life works out that way. The most arrogant, flawless plans usually fall apart because of the smallest detail we chose to overlook. Panic always turns into aggression when someone is backed into a corner. Elena points a shaking finger, demanding they drag the child away. But Donna Lucia glides right into her path, delivering an ice-cold stare that silently reminds her she does not wear the crown yet. Then, Xavier does something brilliant. He doesn't scream or accuse her. Instead, he speaks in the flat tone of a man ordering an execution. He casually mentions his men are downloading every single frame of the kitchen security footage, dropping a harsh reality right onto her theatrical performance. Watching the trap snap shut on a narcissist is really something. It reminds us of a very simple truth. No matter how loud or perfectly crafted a lie might be, the truth never actually has to shout to tear it all apart. Stick with me here because the tension is suffocating. For a split second, Elena short-circuits. You see the pure pear terror flash behind her eyes. A fake sob catches in her throat because she forgets to breathe. But true monsters adapt fast. Swallowing her panic, she agrees they should check those tapes, then pivots into pure manipulation. She points at the 8-year-old child, demanding an apology from her own victim. Across the cold room, little Sophia stands perfectly still, watching a grown woman lose her mind. It breaks your heart, but it leaves us with a real lesson. A guilty person will gladly burn down the entire world just to avoid facing the heat of their own actions. But Elena mutters a fragile excuse and bolts out the door, her coat sweeping behind her like a shadow. The second she vanishes, the heavy room lifts, but then Sophia steps forward. The tiny girl calmly points out that her stepmother didn't look afraid when she saw Xavier bleeding. She only looked terrified when he mentioned those cameras. The armed enforcers freeze, staring at this kid in shock. Xavier turns his pale face toward her, his eyes filled with tragic respect, whispering that she is smarter than his best soldiers. It is a bitter victory. She had to build a razor-sharp mind just to survive the people who were supposed to care for her. Good. The real tragedy of growing up too fast is that the door to childhood locks forever once you leave it behind. Good. Just when you think the trap is closing, Marco steps into the dim hospital room, and the floor drops out. The footage is gone. Exactly 20 minutes of video scrubbed from both the servers and the secure backups. No traces, no footprints. Good. This was never a messy crime of passion, it was a cold, surgical strike. You can see the betrayal punch the air right out of Xavier's lungs. His jaw tightens as the horrific reality sinks in. The poison came from his own inner circle. Good. Someone sitting at his table helped his wife dig his grave. It is the cruelest joke life plays on powerful people. We spend our lives building massive iron walls to keep the wolves away, only to wake up and realize we locked the real monsters inside the house with us. You and I need to look at the terrifying nerve of what happens the next morning. Elena completely flips the script. She calls every cartel boss into the cold, concrete discipline room. The dramatic morning gown is gone. Instead, she wears a sharp blue suit, hood, playing the part of the calm, rational leader. She drops a silver hard drive onto the heavy oak table, lying without a blink that her private team found the missing files. This is the mark of a truly dangerous mind. They do not just deny what they did. Good. They build a fake reality and trap you inside it. It shows us just how easily the truth can be twisted. The lesson here is simple, really. If you do not find the courage to speak up and own your story, someone else will gladly step in and write a nightmare for you. Good. Look closely at this glowing screen with me. We are witnessing a terrifying display of psychological manipulation. The footage shows a sunlit afternoon. Elena smiles at the cook stirring pots, her hands completely empty of poison. Then, the perfect scapegoat appears. Little Sophia, in a bright yellow dress, reaches her tiny fingers toward the doomed plates. Elena pauses the video right there. She does not yell or point fingers. She just leans back in her heavy leather chair, allowing the quiet venom of this framed narrative to infect the minds of the brutal syndicate men around her. She is sliding the noose from her own neck onto a fragile child. We spend our lives trusting what our eyes show us. Good. But the harsh reality of human nature is simple. The most convincing illusions are often built on the absolute darkest lies. Good. Notice how perfectly Elena plays the reluctant martyr at the head of that long mahogany table. Her voice actually shakes as she tells the syndicate she would never accuse a child of murder. But just by planting that toxic seed, she weaponizes the violent paranoia buried inside every lieutenant in the room. You can see the doubt taking hold as these cold-blooded killers shift in their expensive suits. And who pays the price for this engineered illusion? Maria. A desperate mother dragged into a concrete basement for hours of brutal interrogation. It exposes a bitter reality about the cycles of abuse. The kindest, most defenseless souls are always the very first casualties when a true narcissist decides to play their violent games. The cruelty of this underground world moves like a suffocating shadow. A mother and her daughter face violent exile, but look at little Sophia in that windowless holding room. Where any other child would scream, she sits in absolute, terrifying silence. She anchors her small body to the cold concrete in a heartbreaking display of pure survival. The heavy oak doors open to the dim study of the crime boss. Xavier sits in the gloom, his body failing but his mind razor-sharp. He gestures to a massive armchair. The girl pulls herself up, her scuffed sneakers dangling helplessly over the edge. She is a fragile moth staring down an apex predator. It brings us to a profound realization. Often, the smallest among us carry a quiet courage that easily outshines the violent terrors of the adult world. Xavier leans in, his voice cutting through the shadows. He tells the child he has video proof of her guilt. Grown enforcers would shake under that stare, but the little girl does not blink. With a flat expression, she tells the Mafia boss his footage is fake. Her defense is simple. The video shows her wearing a yellow sweater, but she knows her mother dyed that exact fabric pink months ago to hide a stubborn stain. An expensive digital frame job is completely dismantled by the quiet reality of poverty and cheap laundry. Xavier might be a monster, but his predatory brain processes the truth instantly. He violently barks orders to find old family photographs. We see this happen all the time. No matter how elaborate the deception might be, the smallest, most ordinary human details will always bring the lie crashing down. Stick with me, because this is where the power dynamic shifts. Watch the agonizing paranoia of a crime boss who realizes his fortress is made of paper. Xavier gives his crew 20 minutes to find old photographs of the child. Marco bursts back in 18. He throws 12 pictures across the polished mahogany desk. In every single one, Sophia wears a faded pink cardigan. Not yellow, Pink, it is undeniable proof of an inside betrayal. Look closely at the matriarch, Donna Lucia, in the shadows. She does not gasp or yell. She simply draws one agonizingly slow, calculated breath. Her untouchable syndicate has been breached. The silence in that room is louder than a gunshot. It serves as a harsh reminder. Good. The most devastating storms in our lives rarely arrive with loud thunder. They come in a quiet, breathless whisper. Good. Notice the tremor in his jaw as the horrifying reality takes hold. Xavier realizes his own fiancée orchestrated this toxic deception weeks in advance. Think about the chilling sociopathy it takes to smile at a man over coffee while funneling his money to hackers. Good. The life lesson here is brutal. Sharing a bed never guarantees someone's true loyalty. Physical proximity is a dangerous illusion. As the sun sets, casting bleeding shadows across the estate, Xavier returns home. His body is collapsing from the poison. Good. Yet his immense pride demands one final show of strength. He violently shoves the medical wheelchair away. With his muscles screaming in pain, he forces himself to walk upright through those towering front doors. Good. Stubbornly buttoning his expensive suit jacket, directly over his blood-soaked bandages. Good. The second that heavy oak door clicks shut, Xavier whispers a single command: sweep. His enforcers fan out through the estate like vengeful ghosts. The eerie hum of electronic scanners becomes the sickening soundtrack to a crumbling Mafia empire. Good. They tear his immaculate life apart, ripping open-air vents and shattering antique drawers. 22 minutes into the chaos, a scanner lets out a sharp wail. The head of security drops to the rug beneath the grand walnut desk. Good. His flashlight catches a tiny hidden audio transmitter, barely the size of a fingernail. Its battery is still pulsing red. Every private conversation in his sanctuary was harvested. It is a chilling reminder. Good. The massive walls we build to keep our enemies away are often the exact same walls that trap us inside with our most intimate betrayals. Good. For 3 weeks, this tiny bug has broadcast his darkest sins to his enemies. A weaker boss would destroy the room in a rage. But Xavier remains completely still. He slowly sits down, pressing his bare palm flat against the cold wood of his grandfather's vintage desk. He is anchoring his failing body to the roots of his crime family. Then, Marco steps into the room holding the security logs. It is the final twist of the knife. Good. The data shows Elena slipped into this private sanctuary 4 separate times while he was out of the country. As the crushing weight of her betrayal suffocates the air, Donna Lucia glides toward the towering bookshelves. The matriarch moves in a chilling, unbroken silence. It teaches us a profound lesson. When a human heart is completely shattered, true danger does not scream. True danger gets absolutely quiet. Watch the fierce matriarch step into the deep shadows of the study. She reaches behind a row of heavy books, revealing a hidden steel wall safe. It is supposed to be secured by a strict family code, but as her fingers pull the handle, the heavy iron door gives way. Good. It is already unlocked. She stares into the dark cavity. Her vase remains sculpted in pure ice. That is generations of Mafia survival instinct, keeping the terror out of her eyes. Her voice is a ghostly whisper when she tells her son a file has vanished. Good. Xavier drifts over, the dim light catching a defeated tremor in his shoulders. 5 thick folders remain untouched. But the 6th slot is violently empty. That hollow void is a surgical strike to the beating heart of his syndicate. It reveals a tragic truth. Good. The deepest wounds in life are never inflicted by a stranger, but by the trusted hand that knows exactly where to cut. Good. Xavier does not even need an index to understand this ruin. His mind instantly knows the missing folder is the master ledger for the Brooklyn docks. It is the holy grail of their enterprise. Good. Documenting secret smuggling routes and the names of every corrupt politician on their payroll. In the corner, Marco is pacing wildly, cursing in rapid Italian. He sees the absolute collapse of their world. If the authorities get those pages, they will rot in concrete cages. But Xavier stays perfectly still, silently calculating the staggering wealth required to buy this level of intimate betrayal. Marco stops dead, locking eyes with Donna Lucia in a moment of sickening dread. Good. There is only one ghost vicious enough to orchestrate this nightmare: Victor Kane. It proves a bitter reality. The higher you build your golden empire, the darker the monsters grow in the shadows beneath it. Good. You and I have to go back 15 years to understand this cycle of violence. We must look at the pure evil of Victor Kane. This is the rival boss who ran Xavier's father off a highway, crushing his car against a concrete wall. Good. The psychological horror lies in what happened next. Kane walked right into the funeral parlor, placed his hand on young Xavier's trembling shoulder, and whispered hollow condolences while the boy wept. It is a cruelty that defies reason. Back in the dim study, Xavier slowly traces a faded scar on his cheek, the physical echo of that crash. The agonizing truth breaks over him. The woman he promised to marry was simply a forged weapon, wielded by the exact same demon who slaughtered his father. Good. It leaves us with a haunting realization. Time does not actually heal all wounds. Sometimes it merely hides the blade until we are completely defenseless. Good. Right in the middle of this nightmare, Constance steps into the light. She is the housekeeper, a woman who has quietly served this family for 38 years. Her hands rest on her clean apron as she drops a bombshell. A week ago, someone delivered a massive bouquet of red roses for Elena. While trimming them, Constance noticed a weird white powder. Thinking it was just plant food, she casually washed a deadly toxin right down the drain. An elite biological hit, planned by a ruthless syndicate, entirely ruined by a sweet lady who just wanted to keep the counters clean. It goes to show you that the darkest plans of powerful people are often undone by the simple, innocent routines of everyday life. The true horror of the situation hits Xavier and Donna Lucia at the exact same time. The violent chaos from the night before was never just a warning. It was a dress rehearsal for a total massacre, and the walls of their fortress are already broken. Donna Lucia marches to the garage apartments. Her eyes are cold as she orders Maria to pack bags, forcing the terrified mother and her child into the main mansion. Maria trembles, twisting a damp towel in her hands while begging to run away to Queens. She might be at the bottom of this food chain, but her motherly survival instincts are sharp. She understands the harsh truth of this world. Standing too close to the blinding fire of power does not keep you warm. It only guarantees you will eventually burn. Let us pause here, you and I, to look at the terrifying grace of the matriarch. She does not offer Maria a shoulder to cry on. Instead, Donna Lucia turns her voice to ice and shatters the poor woman's illusion of freedom. She calmly explains that a heavily armed crew is hunting her little girl. Then the matriarch springs her trap. She whispers that out in Queens, Maria and Sophia are sitting ducks, but here they are shielded by stone walls and armed guards. This is the tragic moment true dependence takes root. The captor isolates the prey and becomes their false god of survival. It reminds us of a hard truth we all face. The strongest cages we will ever find ourselves in are rarely made of iron bars, but built from our own desperate fear of the unknown. The camera pushes slowly into the sprawling suite, bathed in a cold and unnatural light. The family is now dropped into a suffocating world of wealth. The frame centers on little Sophia, who looks tiny next to a massive bed. It is a psychological trap meant to overwhelm them. Now watch Xavier step into the doorway. The irony of fate writes a bitter script here. The feared Mafia boss is forced to lean heavily on a wooden cane, his ego cracking with every painful step. Wearing a plain dark sweater, he looks fragile and entirely human. He asks permission to enter before dragging his broken body into a chair. Life has a cruel way of proving that no man is immune to the weakness of his own body, no matter how much power he holds. The trap is officially set. Stick with me here as we watch the exact moment their minds lock together in the dim light. Xavier breaks the heavy silence, asking in a raspy voice if she is scared. The child nods. She trembles and holds up her stuffed bear like a tiny shield. Then, in a whisper, she mentions her father. He was crushed in a building collapse when she was 4, leaving her nothing but the fading memory of how he smelled like cinnamon. The camera cuts back to Xavier, his jaw clenching tight. The apex predator, a man who has erased entire families, just stares blindly ahead. For the first time in his life, he actually looks at the human cost of his dark world. We all must eventually face the pain we cause others, and his bitter reckoning has finally arrived. You can almost hear the rusted gears grinding behind his cold eyes. This little girl looks right through his hardened shell and asks the ultimate question. She asks if he is a bad man. The dim light catches the deep lines on his face as he builds his defense. He admits to doing terrible things but recites his sacred rules. He protects children, stays loyal, and demands total honesty at his table. But Sophia, armed with the sharp innocence of youth, points out that his own fiancé broke that final rule. The camera lingers on Xavier. He does not scream or shout. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spreads across his lips. It is the look of a wolf realizing the cage is open. The truth always sets us free, even if that freedom leads to a bloody war. Hidden in the deep shadows of the hallway, Donna Lucia watches this tragic play unfold. Xavier is not speaking like a feared kingpin, nor is he playing the wounded victim. His voice drops into the soft tone of a regular, tired uncle. We are watching the generational curse of this family finally start to crack. As Xavier grips his wooden cane to leave, the child stops him cold. Let us pause and appreciate the absolute irony of trauma. Fear wires the human brain to catch the dark details that normal people walk right past. She whispers that she saw Elena's partner days ago, waiting in a black sedan with heavy curtains. A normal person sees nothing. Good. But a highly vigilant child knows exactly what silent danger looks like when it hides in plain sight. Good. Xavier freezes, his broad shoulders stiffening as a textbook stress response paralyzes his nervous system. Standing in the soft glow of a child's bedroom, the mob boss feels his entire reality shatter into jagged pieces. Good. These shadow assassins were stalking this fragile kid long before the poison ever touched his coffee. The scene cuts to a harsh, blinding 6 o'clock morning. Dr. Greco stumbles into the grand estate looking like a walking corpse. His skin is pale, but his posture wrecked by an all-night chemical analysis. He slams the lab results onto the heavy desk, abandoning all polite manners. The poison is a heavy derivative of wolfsbane. They were treating a calculated hit like a bad flu. Good. It shows how easily we misjudge the true threats in our lives. Good. The camera pushes in on Dr. Greco as he explains the terrifying science, tapping the raw lab data. A massive dose stops your heart in 60 minutes flat, leaving zero trace for the morgue. But the psychological torture is infinitely worse. Microdosed over weeks, you do not die outright. Your brain and body slowly rot from the inside. You stop sleeping, your reflexes wither, and reality blurs. It is a cruel method that tricks the victim into blaming old age. In the background, Marco sinks into the shadows. His arms cross tight over his chest as pure guilt consumes him. His massive security team had completely failed. They watched their boss get poisoned and wrote it off as a stressful week. Arrogant ignorance is always our deadliest enemy. Xavier sits frozen like a stone statue carved from grief. His knuckles are white against the desk while his thumb obsessively rubs an old scar. It is a desperate anchor keeping his mind from breaking. He forces Marco to recount exactly how blind he had been. Marco lists the deliveries, and the sickening irony hangs heavy in the air. Every single dose was dressed up as a tender act of true love. The morning espresso brought to his bed. The weekend desserts she insisted on baking alone. She hid a brutal murder behind the exact things we call romance. By the window, Donna Lucia's face drains of color, realizing she ate those same meals. But Greco cuts off her panic with cold facts. Elena is a psychopath. Sometimes, the faces we trust most hide the darkest intentions. The lens focuses tightly on the silver serving dish. She slipped the poison perfectly into his specific portion. That is what makes this tragedy so intensely personal. The killer builds a hollow bubble of safety by eating from the exact same table, playing God with the silverware. Now, listen closely, because this is where the calculated evil of her plot really comes into focus. Marco flips the investigation to the money. In just 2 short weeks, $3 million had been surgically sliced from Xavier's private accounts. It was a flawless 2-step trap. First, she melts his brain with the toxic flour, then she uses his heavy confusion to make him sign real checks. It proves that a clever lie will always do more damage than a loaded gun. Every bank transfer was timed to dodge the internal security alarms. She made her silent moves on the nights the poison gave him paralyzing migraines. Xavier slowly closes his eyes, with the heavy shadows on his face, highlighting the absolute humiliation of his downfall. She weaponized his own love against him. She waited until his fading brain was shutting down to slide legal papers under his trembling pen. He simply told himself he was just getting old, letting his massive ego hide the terrifying truth. But then Marco drops the final, devastating bomb on the desk. A legal contract handing Elena total power over the family's massive foundation the second he becomes medically unfit. It is a harsh reminder that absolute pride will always blind us to our own destruction. The papers carry the undeniable stamp of Elena's brother, proving this was a coordinated family betrayal. Marco's voice flatlines. $40 million, stolen from innocent orphans. You and I are probably watching this unfold with the exact same question. How does a human heart freeze over so completely? To steal money meant to buy a mobster redemption requires a spirit utterly devoid of empathy. Xavier's trembling hand slowly curls into a fist. The wounded predator is finally waking up. Father Antonio steps into the dim doorway. The priest had refused to bless Elena from the start, spotting the rot in her eyes long before the proof arrived. It leaves us with a quiet truth. Sometimes, a silent observer spots the snake in the grass long before it ever strikes. The priest's silent disgust lands like a physical blow. Elena did not just break the law, she spat on a sacred tribal code. That is the final trigger. The camera stays low as Xavier slowly rises, abandoning his cane on the floor. We are witnessing that terrifying glitch where white-hot rage completely overrides physical agony. The ruthless boss is back online, his voice cracking as he orders a lockdown on the cash. Running on violent adrenaline, Marco uncovers the smoking gun. Good. The fake companies trace directly to the rival Kane family. Outside, the hitman Hawk locks his eyes on Elena's house, beginning a 16-hour death watch. It leaves us with an unavoidable lesson. Sometimes, the people you trust to guard your back are the exact ones holding the knife. Good. Let us pause and appreciate the terrifying nerve of Elena's exit. She packs her luxury bags and plays the perfect victim, acting as if the suspicion is too much to bear. It is a brilliant, tragic performance. Good. She keeps her dark sunglasses bolted on, so nobody can spot the cold calculation in her eyes. The doorman buys the heartbroken routine entirely. But Hawk is no civilian. He is an apex hunter in a concrete jungle. Good. His eyes catch the shifting of a black van down the block, moving just enough to dodge security patrols. Hawk reads the street like a bloody chessboard. Soon he pulls the logs and slaps a name on the ghost watching her. The lesson here is simple. Good. A flawless mask might fool the crowd, but it will never hide the truth from another predator. Good. Hawk recognizes the name the second it flashes on the screen. Daniel Cross is no random muscle. He is a phantom who washes dirty money for the Kane family without tripping a federal wire. You and I know exactly what this implies. Good. The biggest predators in the city are pulling the strings. Hawk grabs the keys to a rusted truck and tails, cross through the rain-washed streets. They land at a high-end bar where expensive lawyers go to drown their sins. Cross slides into a corner booth. Good. Ordering nothing, he simply sits there, shoulders pulled tight, radiating the nervous energy of a cornered dog waiting for its master to bring the leash. It is a grim reminder. No matter how much dark power a person thinks they hold, good, there is always someone bigger holding their chain. Good. The camera pans across the table as the master finally glides into frame. The betrayal hits like a physical blow. He wears a thick cashmere coat, the flawless armor of a man who destroys bloodlines with a pen rather than a gun. In the shadows, good, Hawk holds his breath as the camera clicks, freezing the nightmare into proof. It is Sebastian Voss, Elena's own brother. The cold lighting catches the posture of a man who could lie to a judge without skipping a heartbeat. Their meeting is a silent, paranoid ballet. Good. No hands are shaken. A thick white envelope scrapes across the wood, a dead transfer of sins. They exit through separate doors, vanishing into the night. It reveals a devastating truth about life. Good. The most fatal wounds are always inflicted by the hands we invite to our own dinner table. Good. Marco tosses the heavy folder onto the oak desk, letting the truth spill out under the amber lamplight. This was a cold execution, orchestrated by the woman who promised to wear Xavier's ring. Xavier does not move. The silence in the study is suffocating. Slowly, his thumb twists, his father's gold signet ring, rubbing the metal until his skin goes pale. We have all made this tragic mistake. We stare into the dark, waiting for the monster to arrive, blind to the fact that the people we love are quietly building our cage. Good. The romantic fool who wanted to be a husband died the second that folder hit the wood. The ruthless cartel kingpin just woke up in his place. It is a harsh reminder that betrayal does not just break a heart. It completely burns down the person we used to be. Good. The lens pushes close on Xavier's hand. For 15 years he wore that gold ring as a bandage, holding his fractured soul together. Tonight the metal grinds against his bone. He looks like a man who just discovered his religion is a hollow lie. Good. This is a rusty blade shoved into his chest. Donna Lucia drifts into the room, silent as a ghost, placing a mug of black coffee on the desk. "What now?" she whispers. Xavier does not shift his gaze. His hollow eyes remain fixed on the freezing night. Good. Anchored only to the fragile glow of Sophia's bedroom window across the courtyard. Life teaches us a bitter truth. When the strong foundations of our world collapse in betrayal, we are forced to seek our only remaining warmth in the most fragile, unprotected places. Good. Firelight casts shadows across Xavier's face as he exhales a rattling breath, shattering a century of violent tradition. Let us watch closely because he will not react like his father, firing blindly into the storm. Instead, he plays the dying animal. Good. He will feed his betrayers the illusion of control, hand them the heavy rope, and wait for the snap of their necks. Donna Lucia studies his jaw, seeing the ghost of the monster she once married. Across the frozen estate, little Sophia stands perfectly still. Good. Her cheek presses against the freezing window pane, her unblinking eyes piercing into the dark hedges below. It is a reality of human survival. Good. True strength often means learning to quietly weaponize your own agony while the rest of the world assumes you are bleeding out. But the camera drifts through the cold, settling on a figure past the iron gates. His hands are buried in a thick coat. He is motionless, a dark statue staring up at the child's window. He does not march like a sentry, he simply lingers, a shadow that learned to breathe. Good. A normal child would run screaming for safety, but Sophia remains perfectly silent. Her knuckles turn white as she grips her bear, her breath blooming into a circle of fog against the freezing glass. "I see you," she whispers. "It is a devastating tragedy of innocence. Good. In a world devoid of genuine light, we often find dangerous comfort hiding in the very shadows we were taught to fear." Miles away, panic is eating Elena alive. Her phone screen flashes with her 11th desperate call, her tears already dried into cold terror. But Xavier deploys the most agonizing weapon known to man, suffocating silence. He lets Elena drown in her own paranoia for 3 days before sending a single text, "Be here at 8. She arrives early, reeking of raw desperation. The luxury car is gone. Good. Hawk watches from the balcony as she trudges up the icy steps, shivering in the storm. The guards look right through her like a walking ghost. The lens captures every detail of her calculated costume. The diamonds are locked away. She wears a faded sweater. Good. Her hair hangs limp, and the skin beneath her eyes is rubbed red to simulate endless weeping. It is a dark reminder of human nature. The most dangerous predators in this world do not bare their teeth. Good. They simply dress themselves in the fragile skin of the innocent to gain our pity. Good. The room is designed for pure intimidation. They pull her into the freezing sitting room, stripping away any illusion of warmth. Donna Lucia sits rigid, a silent executioner waiting to drop the blade. Marco and Hawk block the oak doors, casting unmoving shadows. Good. In the center sits Xavier. The loving fiancé is gone, replaced by a statue of terrifying ice. Elena's trembling hand pulls back. She realizes she cannot touch him. Let us unpack this defense piece by piece. First, she stammers about a rogue technician. Good. Then she weeps, swearing the files are forged. In a final gasp of manipulation, she weaponizes their romance, crying out that she was meant to wear his white dress. Desperation teaches us a sad truth. When the walls close in, even love is melted down into cheap ammunition. Good. The camera holds tight on Xavier's face. He does not blink. Slowly, he places his mug on the table. The clink echoes like a gunshot. He drops a single word into the dead air: Sebastian. Elena's face contorts into a mask of wounded confusion, but Xavier mercilessly dissects her reality. His voice is a low drumbeat, listing every sin her brother committed. Watch her eyes closely. For a fraction of a second, the facade cracks. Her eyelids flutter in panic. She frantically backpedals, weeping that her brother was just a pawn. Xavier leans forward, shadows swallowing his features. "Daniel Cross," he murmurs. She gasps, violently denying she knows the man. "That is an interesting response," Xavier whispers. Good. It proves that a heavy lie always leaves a bitter, trembling taste on the tongue that tells it. Good. Let us examine this opening scene together, where Xavier drops the executioner axe. He calmly states that his enforcer has watched her apartment for 7 days. Watch closely as her nervous system misfires. A frantic smile contorts her features while she desperately plays the hunted victim. Xavier offers only the cold stare of an abyss. Leaving his wooden cane behind, he rises to his full height. He stands as a monolith of restored power, casting a shadow that shatters her fragile facade. He whispers his verdict, demanding no settlement and no scandal, only permanent exile into the quiet dark. We often learn the hardest way that true power is never loud. Good. It waits silently until the exact moment the illusion of weakness is no longer needed. Good. This is the cinematic frame, where the psychological dynamic flips completely upside down. Xavier presents 2 poison choices. Option 1 demands she pack a suitcase and vanish forever. Good. Option 2 promises to feed every bloody detail of her brother to the federal agents on his payroll. He expects a total collapse and desperate begging. Instead, Elena rises from her chair with a dangerously liquid grace. The painted terror melts away. Good. Replaced by a chilling smile that never reaches her dead eyes. It is an image that will haunt Donna Lucia for months. Life repeatedly teaches us that cornered prey can easily turn out to be the apex predator in disguise. Good. Elena stares directly into his dark eyes and softly whispers that he genuinely believes he still holds the winning cards. Good. Elena lingers in the doorway, tilting her chin so the firelight highlights her face. She embraces her role as the glamorous architect of this tragedy, intent on leaving Xavier bleeding from the inside out. Good. Her lips curl into a razor-thin smile as she delivers a devastating blow. On the exact night he proposed, another assassin was already waiting in his kitchen. She glides away, the heavy oak door clicking shut, with terrifying finality. Absolute chaos erupts. Good. Marco paces furiously in a panic, while Donna Lucia crushes her silver rosary in sudden horror. Xavier simply turns to solid stone. Life continually teaches us that the strike destroying our world rarely comes from the obvious rival. Good. It slips quietly from the familiar shadow we completely forgot to watch. Good. The camera pushes in on the vacant depths of Xavier's eyes. He sits paralyzed in his leather chair, the dark irony wrapping around his throat like a vice. A horrifying puzzle piece finally snaps into place. Good. His bride feeding him slow poison explains the creeping fatigue and blinding migraines. But that catastrophic collapse at the dinner party, with violent convulsions and blood spilling over his chin? That was the brutal work of a completely different butcher. Good. Before Elena reaches the freezing pavement, Xavier is barking urgent orders into his phone, demanding his physician tear apart the old blood samples to find the hidden second toxin. We often spend our entire lives bracing for the roaring hurricane, but entirely unaware of the silent flood, quietly rotting away our floorboards. Good. The heavy phone receiver slams violently into its cradle. Xavier demands medical answers before the sun can breach the horizon. 3 agonizing hours crawl by in suffocating silence. When Dr. Greco crosses the threshold, the weary man looks exactly like a walking corpse. His pale face shines under the amber lights as he slides a report across the wood, pressing a shaking finger to a single line. The slow poison from Elena is listed, yes, good. But lurking directly beneath it is an immediate death sentence, tetrodotoxin. Marco shatters the quiet tension, demanding a plain translation. It is the lethal venom of a pufferfish, offering 0 antidote, paralyzing the lungs in 30 minutes flat. Good. The painful truths we tear the world apart to uncover are so often the very things that finally bury us. Good. The sterile lights hum, painting bruised shadows across Xavier's face. He sits there, wrestling with the terrifying reality that he should be a rotting corpse. The venom was mathematically designed to paralyze his lungs, leaving him fully awake as the oxygen ran out. Good. He grips the doctor coat, demanding immediate answers. The physician stares back, pale as bone, revealing a wonderfully twisted miracle. Elena's slow betrayal, her daily microdoses of toxin, had forced his body to build an iron fortress. Good. Her calculated deceit became a shield, neutralizing the fatal strike of the second assassin. The sheer irony hangs heavy in the quiet room. Good. We eventually realize that the exact trauma designed to slowly break us down often becomes the absolute armor we need to survive the killing blow. Good. Let us pause right here, you and I, and unpack this precise some psychological genius. Xavier freezes, his jaw ticking as the pure madness washes over him. The woman he adored attempted to ruin him, and accidentally saved him from an early grave. Good. He sinks into his leather chair, shaking with a broken, soundless laugh. It is the gasp of a man murdered twice in one evening. Marco shatters the silence, demanding to know who planted the lethal dose. Xavier's dark eyes narrow, Good, rewinding the dinner scene frame by frame in his memory. Elena walking in at 7:42. Vincent, the quiet chef, drizzling the final sauce. Life teaches us a terrifying lesson about human trust. Good. The gentle hands that serve us with the warmest smile are so often the ones hiding the sharpest blade. Good. A guilty man running for his life will always make desperate mistakes. Hawk leans heavily against the dark doorframe, reporting that the chef abandoned his apartment hours ago, snatching only a passport and a cheap bag. In 11 tense minutes, Good. Marco's glowing screen reveals a lifetime of buried secrets. Vincent once cooked at a fading Atlantic City steakhouse. Strip away the fake shell companies, and the money trail leads directly to the Kane crime family. The signature of a rival boss now stains the room like fresh blood. Xavier paces the floor, his thumb endlessly twisting his late father's gold ring, fighting to anchor his unraveling mind. Good. When you build your entire world on a fragile foundation of dark lies, you can never be shocked when the floor finally gives out beneath your feet. Xavier mutters to the shadows, pacing the rug to keep his fragile mind from shattering. 2 distinct poisons, 2 separate monsters circling the exact same prey. His mother sits rigidly in her velvet chair, watching the room like a patient spider, Good, commanding him to connect the violent threads. And he finally does. Elena and Sebastian were blinded by their greed. They needed him breathing, but broken, so they could siphon his wealth. But Victor Kane is a predator of a different breed. He wanted a corpse. Good. By slipping his lethal venom beneath Elena's clumsy toxin, Kane built an airtight trap where the treacherous bride would hang for the murder. We spend so much energy building grand walls to block the enemies charging the front gate. Good. We completely forget to watch the softly smiling neighbor. Good. There is a sickening beauty to the cold perfection of Kane's trap. The forged documents gave the police a flawless motive. Elena would have been locked away, only to be quietly silenced before trial. With the board cleared, Good. Kane would step over the bodies and seize the throne, using the stolen ledger to devour the empire. In the shadows, Xavier's mother grips her silver cross. She is a woman of deep bloodshed hiding behind holy metal. A tragic wave of pity washes over Xavier. Good. Elena was just a fragile pawn, completely blind to the trap closing in. She honestly believed she had won the game. It is the cruelest illusion of power we create. We feel invincible believing we hold the puppet strings, right up, until the agonizing moment we feel the cold shears cut our own wire. Marco states the grim reality. This is a bloody three-way war, and Victor Kane is playing them all. This is the exact moment strategy bleeds into raw tragedy. Hawk bursts through the doors, his bodyguard mask completely shattered. His voice shakes as he delivers the devastating blow. The kid is gone. Before the horrible truth fully registers, pure instinct takes over. Xavier sprints down the dim hallway, driven by blinding terror. He smashes the guest room door wide open. The small blankets are violently torn apart. A tiny pink shirt lies discarded on the cold hardwood floor. The thick iron locks on the window are sliced clean through. You can build grand fortresses and outsmart 100 rivals. But the universe only ever needs one precious weak spot to bring you completely to your knees. The broken window reveals the chilling precision of a predator. A flawless circle was melted through the safety glass to bypass the latch. This was no desperate break-in. It was the silent work of a trained phantom. Maria, the nanny, slumps against the mattress. A dark bruise stains her neck from a high-pressure drug needle. The doctor checks her pulse, confirming she will sleep for hours. It was a surgically measured strike. Xavier steps through the frame into the biting night wind, scanning the dark yard. Then he sees it. Resting alone on the wet patio stones is her little stuffed bear, staring up at the empty sky with a single button eye. When violent men go to war over absolute power, it is always the most innocent souls who become the tragic collateral damage. Let's look at this scene together. Seeing that abandoned teddy bear on the freezing stone pavement hits you right in the chest. Beyond the gates, the wet mud tells a terrible story. 2 deep heel marks dragged into the shadows. Showing exactly how hard the little girl fought. Hawk drops his voice to deliver the cold truth. 3 security cameras went dark for 8 minutes, and no alarms tripped. It was an inside job. We watch Xavier walk slowly to his desk. His face totally emptied of mercy. He opens a drawer and wraps his fingers around the cold metal of a handgun. The polite chess matches are over. The refined businessman is gone, and a father out for blood takes his place. It leaves us with a harsh but real lesson. If you push a good person into total darkness, you cannot act shocked when they finally return as a monster. Down in that claustrophobic basement, we see exactly how fragile purchased loyalty is. Bruno is strapped to a metal chair under a single swinging light bulb. Hawk waits in the shadows, radiating a terrifying threat. But the second Xavier steps into the harsh light and peels the jacket off his shoulders. The guard falls apart. Bruno turns into a crying mess, using his guilt as a shield. He begs, talking about a new baby on the way. Swearing Kane promised the little girl would be safe for $200,000. He tries to use his family to justify selling out an innocent child. Greed might make a person sell their soul, but there is a deeper, harder truth to remember here. The ultimate of cowardice is hiding behind the people you love just to excuse your own unforgivable choices. The tension in the room finally snaps. Xavier is completely done with words. His hand shoots forward, locking tightly around the guard's throat. Using pure rage, he lifts Bruno 3 inches out of the chair, letting out a feral roar as he demands his child back. Bruno chokes, frantically swearing he has no idea. Meanwhile, Marco stays totally detached from the physical violence. He quietly slices through Bruno's phone data, finding the answer in seconds. The drop is set for Pier 17 in Brooklyn at 1:30. It is an empty shipping yard owned by Kane, an obvious, undeniable trap crawling with gunmen. This moment shows us something profound about what true devotion actually requires. Sometimes, to protect the things you care about most in this world, you have to willingly march yourself straight into a burning fire. Let's pause here and watch Donna Lucia glide into this basement. This matriarch does not just walk into a room, she commands the oxygen inside it. She steps past the crying guard like he is a mere stain on the concrete. Xavier meets his mother's eyes, knowing perfectly well that Kane has set a flawless trap. But the tragic reality is that he is going anyway. A terrified little girl risked her life to save his, and his conscience will not let him abandon her. Xavier knows driving to this pier is an absolute suicide mission. But this brings us to a heavy realization about who we really are. True loyalty is never about picking the safe or comfortable path. It is about honoring the deep, painful debts of the heart, even when paying them means walking directly into your own destruction. Notice how Marco operates here, like a conductor putting together a violent symphony. The opening act is purposely loud, kicking the front doors in to give Kane exactly the blind rage he expects. The second act relies on silence, with men slipping through the basement unseen. But the grand finale belongs to the cold intellect of Donna Lucia. She quietly pulls strings with a local priest to point the police toward the warehouse, forcing simultaneous raids on K&S properties. Good. It is a move of absolute poetry. Marco actually bows his head to her in pure respect. There is a brilliant practical lesson about survival hidden here. When a powerful enemy gets overly confident and tries to control every single square on the board, you do not play their game. You just flip the table over entirely and let someone else crush them for you. The camera holds on a moment of pure, quiet heartbreak. Xavier drops heavily onto the cold, marble floor, resting his face against his mother's hands. He is begging for forgiveness before he goes out to shed blood. Donna Lucia does not pull away. Her voice is like a sweet poison, calmly framing his upcoming violence as a holy crusade. She is washing away his guilt, so his trigger finger stays steady. The edit then slams us into little Sophia's nightmare, waking up alone in crushing darkness. You can almost smell the rotting brick surrounding her. Let's look at this closely and recognize a terrifying truth about human nature. The most dangerous weapons we have are never the guns we carry. The most destructive things on earth are the beautiful, but comforting lies we tell ourselves, just to justify the terrible pain we cause. The lighting shifts in the room, throwing harsh shadows over Sophia. The thick plastic of the zip ties digs into her small wrists, a brutal reminder of her capture. Then comes the most calculated act of cruelty. One of the men tosses a stiff, cheap teddy bear against her chest. It is a sick prop, meant to mock her fear and prove that they control her entire world. But as the camera pushes in, something heartbreaking happens. Her small fingers slowly close around the rough fabric, pulling the rigid toy tight against her chest. It is a stunning picture of survival. We can learn a lot from this quiet moment, even when the world steals your warmth. The human spirit is so fiercely stubborn that it will hold on to a complete illusion of safety just to keep the soul from breaking in the dark. The heavy oak door swings open and Victor Kane steps into the frame. His entire presence is engineered to dominate. Notice the soft drape of his black cashmere and the dull gleam of his gold signet ring. He closes the door with a terrifyingly gentle click. Pacing slowly around Sophia, a tiny 8-year-old girl, he leans down, his voice drips with fake sympathy, asking how a little thing could ever threaten his empire. He waits for her tears. Instead, Sophia simply locks her jaw, offering a cold, unbroken silence. It is a masterpiece of quiet defiance. The lesson here is profound, and it is something you and I see often in life. Any man who must wear an armor of fear and terrorize a helpless child just to feel mighty is truly the most fragile soul in the room. Let's take a hard look at the framing of this exact second. The camera barely moves, forcing us to sit in this quiet, suffocating gravity. Watch Victor's posture. He doesn't yell or slam his fists. He doesn't even lean across the table to cast a shadow over her. Instead, he sits perfectly still, letting the sheer, unbearable weight of his presence suck the oxygen right out of the room. This is the anatomy of absolute control. True power, the kind that fractures a person's spirit, never actually needs to raise its voice. It just waits patiently, for you to realize the doors are already locked. There is a simple truth here that applies to us all. The monsters we should fear most rarely roar from the dark. Usually, they sit calmly across from us in a well-lit room. Let's pause the film right here. You and I need to look closely at this shattered family. Notice how the camera drifts with Camila Kane as she brings in a glass of warm milk. Her posture is flawless. Yet she is completely blind to the nightmare they are forcing on this 8-year-old girl. She sets the porcelain down. That soft clink echoes like a warning bell, and she quietly tells a starving Sophia to drink. Any regular kid would grab it. But trauma sharpens the mind. Instead of taking the bait, Sophia hears her protector Xavier. His voice whispers in her memory like a ghost at her shoulder. It brings up a bitter reality we all face. When you are trapped in a room with the worst of humanity, the memory of someone who actually cared about you becomes your only real armor. Xavier taught her, one rule: never take what the enemy hands you. Watch the close-up. This starving little girl slowly pushes the glass away. The camera snaps to Victor Kane. His eyes crinkle into a freezing smile. He finds her defiance funny. Just before he pivots to manipulation, he mocks Xavier. Then, his voice drops to a smooth whisper. He demands this traumatized child rewrite her memory. She needs to swear only Elena touched the poisoned sauce, completely erasing the man in the black jacket. Freedom, good, he says, for one tiny lie. It is a sickening scene. But it leaves us with a harsh lesson. True predators never loudly demand your soul. They offer a quiet, reasonable bargain. They just chip away at your truth, piece by tiny piece, until they own your entire reality. Watch the camera push in on little Sophia. The silence feels incredibly heavy. Victor's smile, that fake fatherly warmth, cracks and falls away like cheap plaster. He leans close, threatening the only thing she has left, her mother. Honestly, we have to admire this kid. Good. A single tear rolls down her cheek, but she blinks hard. She lifts her trembling chin and simply tells him no. Victor straightens up. His eyes go dark. He looks at her like dirt, enraged that a child whose feet barely reach the floor is shutting him down. Good. It brings us to a beautiful point about life. True courage is never the absence of fear. Courage is feeling your heart hammer against your ribs, knowing you could lose everything, and still choosing to stare the monster right in the eye. Good. The heavy oak door clicks shut, sealing the room in cold shadows. It is just Camila and the trembling child. The camera lingers on Camila's hollow eyes, beaten down by her own long captivity. She crouches, her voice barely a whisper, good, confessing that Sophia reminds her of her own shattered youth. She begs for forgiveness, seeing her broken soul in the little girl's gaze. And then, she simply turns the lock and walks away. Good. We have to remember that empathy without action is just a softer kind of violence. But do not count Sophia out. Watch how her eyes dart across the dim room, tracing the frayed cord, the wooden chair legs, and that glass of milk. Good. The lesson here is brutal but deeply necessary. When the world abandons you, you must gather the broken pieces and claw your own way out. Good. Let us cut to the cold Brooklyn waterfront, where rain is coming down in sheets against the concrete. 3 blacked-out tactical trucks rumble to a halt at Pier 17. Xavier steps out into the freezing deluge, strapped in a heavy vest under a soaked overcoat. He looks like a man walking to his own funeral. 6 shadows fan out behind him. Over the radio, Marco tries to break the tension, joking that the cracked warehouse door is an obvious trap. He tells Xavier to smile for the cameras. Xavier does not even blink. Good. He just pushes forward, marching directly into the jaws of hell. You and I can see the tragic beauty of love playing out right here. Real loyalty means walking straight into the fire, fully accepting that you might never walk back out. Good. The lens glides slowly through the belly of this rotting warehouse. Sickly yellow lights bleed through the damp air, casting long shadows. The towering steel shelves look like the ribs of a decaying beast. Sitting dead center in the gloom is a single red velvet chair. Good. Elena is bound to it with thick plastic ties, heavy tape covering her mouth. She looks physically destroyed, but the camera pushes in close on her eyes. They are wild with terror, yet fiercely alive. Xavier freezes 20 feet away, the dead silence ringing in his ears. He realizes instantly that this setup is far too poetic. It is a psychopathic invitation. There is a harsh, unforgettable truth to learn here. When the stage is set with perfect lighting, you are no longer the hunter. Good. You are the prey. Good. Stick with me, because we need to look closely at Victor. He could not wait 24 hours after Elena packed her bags. His suffocating need for control could not let her walk away, so he dragged her back as human bait. His voice echoes down from the high rafters, gently calling Xavier his son. The tone is sickeningly warm, a perfect illusion of fatherly love. Xavier has not heard that voice in 15 years, and you can visibly see the wounded child inside him freeze. It is gut-wrenching. Victor paces the catwalk above, Good, flanked by 8 snipers, calmly promising the girl will not be harmed. The tragic part? A piece of Xavier still wants to believe him. Always remember this simple fact. The people who shout the loudest about keeping you safe are often your true jailers. Good. Watch how the camera frames this power play. Kane leans over the railing, arrogantly ordering Xavier to drop his weapons and climb the stairs empty-handed. He wants to strip away all of Xavier's armor, but Xavier remains entirely cold. Good. He softly offers a simple trade, Sophia for Elena. Kane throws his head back and laughs, bragging that their cursed bloodline will end tonight. Notice Xavier's calm breathing. He does not panic. He simply raises 3 fingers, holds them for a heartbeat, and drops his hand. Instantly, the warehouse erupts into a blinding cathedral of heavy gunfire. 2 of Kane's men drop before they realize the game has flipped. The lesson here is absolute. When someone forces you into a rigged game, you do not play. Good. You burn the entire board. Good. Heavy lead is actively chewing through solid steel. We are watching a nightmare unfold, yet these men remain entirely hollowed out by the cycle of violence. A slug tears straight into the thigh of Xavier's man. He does not scream. Good. He simply drops to his bleeding knees, pulling his trigger with chilling indifference. Behind a rusted iron pillar, Xavier pins Kane down with terrifying calm. Kane, the arrogant king of this criminal world, scurries into the shadows the second his bloated ego takes a hit. Then Hawk's voice crackles over the radio with cheerful psychopathy as 12 heavily armed men emerge from the storm drains. Take this to heart. Good. The winner in this brutal life is rarely the toughest guy in the room. It is always the man who can swallow his panic the longest. But Hawk and his team obliterate the iron door, crashing into Kane's flank like a sledgehammer on glass. 5 gunmen drop dead before their knees touch the concrete. The survivors surrender instantly, proving that bought loyalty evaporates when death enters the room. Up on the catwalk, Kane is screaming in panic as he scrambles toward a tunnel. But you and I need to watch Xavier in this exact cinematic frame. Surrounded by chaos, he halts his sprint just long enough to slice the ropes binding Elena to her chair. He could have abandoned her, but he chose mercy. It forces us to confront a brutal truth. You never truly know someone during times of peace. Their genuine nature only bleeds out in those terrifying fractions of a second, when the world collapses into fire around them. Watch the camera push in on the pathetic unraveling of a traitor. Elena rips the tape from her mouth, gasping for air as she begs Xavier. She hysterically spills every secret about the stolen cash and the hidden ledgers, desperately playing the victim. Notice her frantic body language. She refuses to take responsibility for a single selfish choice she made. Xavier just stares down at her with eyes like dead winter. There is no pity left in his soul. He tosses his knife to Hawk, orders him to bind her ankles, and leaves her for the feds arriving in 10 minutes. Clicking his flashlight, he sprints after Kane into the darkness. Remember this simple lesson. Betrayals built entirely on selfish greed will always collapse under the heavy weight of their own ugly cowardice. Shift the focus 2 floors up, to where the narrative truly shatters your heart. Little Sophia sits alone while a war explodes downstairs, and she never even flinches. This is the devastating tragedy of a child raised inside a criminal empire. Instead of weeping, she twists her bound wrists, attempting an old escape trick. The thick plastic cuts into her thumbs, but her breathing stays steady. Her dark eyes lock onto a glass of warm milk resting on a nearby table. Growing up around ruthless men taught her one vital rule. You give paper cups to hostages and real glass to guests. I want you to think about that profound detail. Even in the absolute most terrifying darkness, human beings will always find a quiet, desperate way to communicate a tiny sliver of hope to one another. The glass of milk was never an accident. Kane's wife left it there with exact intention. Living under a brutal monster, Camila could not defy him openly. She left that glass as a silent rescue note. Sophia understands the assignment. Gripping the heavy chair with tied hands, she drags it across the concrete. Gathering every ounce of momentum in her tiny frame, she throws herself sideways into the table. The glass plummets, exploding into a sharp starburst across the floor. She drops to her knees and snatches the largest shard. It is smooth on one side and absolutely lethal on the other. It reveals a bitter, poetic truth about existence. Sometimes, surviving a true nightmare requires you to shatter the exact same things that were originally offered to bring you comfort. Observe the unbreakable willpower of this young girl. Industrial zip ties do not slice open. You must saw through them, millimeter by agonizing millimeter. Sweat pours into her eyes, and her thumbs are bleeding. Yet she maintains a perfect rhythm. 50 deep cuts with the glass, a breath, then 50 more. She perfectly matches the rhythm of her mother kneading bread on Sunday mornings. Think about the profound tragedy of relying on a gentle memory to survive a kidnapping. 15 brutal minutes later, the thick plastic finally snaps. She rubs her bruised wrists, grabs her stuffed bear, and tries the handle. It opens without a sound. This life lesson is vital. No matter how impossibly tight your personal chains might feel today, persistent, quiet effort will always break you free. The camera lingers on Sophia, realizing her cage was never locked. Pushing the door open, she stares down a claustrophobic hallway, lit by flickering yellow bulbs. The noise is terrifying. Heavy rifles echo violently downstairs, and Amsan screams in Italian above her. Her heart hammers, but an anchor memory strikes. She remembers Xavier's instruction. When you are scared, count the doors. Memorize the path. That is how you stay grounded in hell. Slipping into the shadows, she clutches her bear and starts counting. 1, 2, 3 doors, then a dark stairwell. A thug yells into a phone behind the first door. She does not panic. She keeps creeping toward the stairs. You and I must remember this truth. When the world spins out of control, cold logic is the only weapon that will save you. Sophia presses her shoulders against the freezing brick, slipping through the heavy shadows like a phantom. Through the grimy window, the dark harbor offers a fleeting glimpse of escape. Suddenly, a furious voice shatters the quiet, screaming to find the girl. She throws herself behind a heavy clay pot just as a killer sprints past, completely blind to the trembling child mere inches away. He vanishes down the stairwell, leaving an agonizing silence in his wake. Taking 2 shaky breaths, Good. She deliberately steps back into the open hallway. You and I need to examine what genuine bravery actually looks like in this sequence. It is never about being entirely fearless or feeling bulletproof. Good. True courage is simply taking that next vulnerable step forward, even when terror has paralyzed your spirit. Good. Rounding the corner, Sophia nearly collides with Camila. The crime-obsessed wife stands perfectly still, a haunting apparition in a white blouse. For decades, she has been the portrait of complicity, quietly enabling a ruthless monster. But in this scene, she shatters the cycle of violence. Kneeling, she confesses a sacred promise she made to her mother to never let a child suffer. She points a trembling finger toward the steel exit, urging the girl to flee. Even while shaking, Sophia pauses, locks eyes with her, and whispers a simple thank you. Camila's cold mask finally cracks, exposing years of agonizing sorrow before she whispers for her to run. The profound lesson here is undeniable. Sometimes, the purest acts of mercy come from the broken souls trapped deepest inside the monster's maze. Good. Sophia reaches the steel door, pushing the heavy bar with every ounce of strength. The lock gives way, letting the freezing harbor fog wash over her face. She steps onto the slick pier just as deafening gunfire erupts inside the warehouse, rattling her small chest. Driven by pure adrenaline, she bolts into a claustrophobic maze of shipping containers. She presses against the icy metal, desperately trying to quiet the chaotic hammering of her heart. Then she hears it. Deliberate footsteps crunching over the wet wood, moving directly toward her. A towering shadow stretches across the ground, swallowing the pale moonlight entirely. This mirrors a bitter reality we all eventually face. True, paralyzing terror always thrives most fiercely in the pitch-black, empty spaces of the unknown. Sophia nearly screams, but a familiar whisper cuts through the fog. It is Marco, the aging syndicate advisor. He drops to one knee on the wet dock, opening his arms, and she launches into his embrace. The film highlights a heartbreaking psychological reality. When trapped in a war zone, a person will fiercely cling to anyone offering a shred of safety. Marco wraps his heavy coat around her trembling shoulders. She weeps for exactly 3 seconds before her hardwired survival instincts take over. Pulling away, she looks the old gangster in the eye and demands to know where Xavier is. Marco stares into the dark tunnel, clicks his radio, and reports the child is safe. This reveals a raw, undeniable truth. Genuine loyalty is never built on empty words. It always demands concrete action when everything around you is burning. Stick with me, because this is where the narrative goes ice cold. Marco's radio crackles just as Xavier enters the tunnel, confirming the child is safe. You and I need to appreciate the profound cinematic irony here. For hours, Xavier has been suffocating on panic. But those words unhook the heavy steel cable in his chest. His fear does not vanish. It freezes into pure, hyper-focused lethality. He launches into a dead sprint down this rotting, Prohibition-era artery. The camera tracks him through seeping black water and the choking stench of kerosene. Bare bulbs throb overhead, mimicking a dying heartbeat. His footsteps bounce off the curved walls, yet a chilling clarity of purpose has completely consumed his soul. Never forget this simple truth about human nature. A broken man who finally attains a perfectly clear mind is the most dangerous force on earth. Xavier tears through that suffocating tunnel, fueled by unfiltered rage. He kicks open a rusted door, spilling onto a hidden dock carved into the seawall. A getaway boat churns the icy water, and right there stands Victor Kane. The megalomaniac's grand master plan has finally stalled. His silver hair is plastered to his skull by the freezing rain, his expensive overcoat hanging open, like a sodden flag of defeat. Notice the brilliant symbolic detail here. That heavy gold signet ring still flashes in the erratic light, a pathetic attempt to hold on to his fading syndicate power. This teaches us a definitive lesson about the human ego. When a tyrant is forced to watch their carefully constructed reality burn to ashes, the illusion of control evaporates. All that remains is a terrified, fragile old man shivering alone in the storm. Look closely at how Kane grips that black pistol. It displays the casual familiarity of a man who turned human suffering into corporate policy. 15 years, the old boss murmurs over the driving storm. Xavier stops dead, his weapon hanging loosely by his side. Even facing his inevitable end, Kane cannot suppress his toxic obsession with dominating the room. He gloats, bragging that he waited a decade and a half to force the son to kneel exactly like his father did. But Xavier does not blink. He calmly shatters that pathetic delusion by quoting a terrified mortician's late-night autopsy report. His father never knelt. He stood tall, stared the hit squad dead in the eyes, and went down firing. There is simply no greater weapon against a narcissistic control freak then shoving the cold, unvarnished truth right down their throat. Good. Xavier dissects the tragic past with the precision of a coroner. He calmly explains how his father's final bullets punched cleanly through the glass, instantly dropping Kane's top killer. Good. Watch the muscles in Kane's face closely here. His mouth tightens into a furious spasm. His ego-driven delusion has just been violently ripped away, leaving the tyrant muttering about mere details. The two men slowly circle each other on the rotting boards, suspended dangerously over the churning black water. Unable to bear the mockery, Kane snaps and fires first. The heavy round shatters the wet brick where Xavier just stood. Without missing a beat, Xavier drops to one knee and squeezes off a single, devastating shot into the old man's shoulder. Blind arrogance is always loud and chaotic, but disciplined patience is what truly wins the war. Good. The older man stumbles backward, crashing against a stack of splintered wooden crates. Blood seeps rapidly into his expensive coat, but the truly sickening detail is the unsettling smile spreading across his pale face. Xavier closes the gap in a heartbeat, his gun barrel leveled dead center at the kingpin's forehead. But Kane just lets out a wet, rattling laugh, whispering that Xavier will never pull the trigger. Then he drops the ultimate toxic bomb. If Kane dies tonight, a hidden switch will automatically blast a forged file to federal authorities, framing Xavier for his own father's assassination. It is a beautifully evil manipulation from a desperate, cornered animal. You see, there's a dark psychological truth here. Some men will gladly burn the entire world down just to avoid dying alone in the dark. Let us step into this freezing moment together, because the emotional cruelty on display here is heartbreaking. This phantom file is loaded with fabricated photos and doctored phone records, engineered to prove Xavier ordered the hit on his own father. Xavier goes completely rigid in the rain, struck by the suffocating realization of being perfectly trapped. He stares down at the bleeding boss and mutters that none of it is true. Kane just smiles wider, revealing blood-stained teeth. He openly admits the lie, relishing the perfection of his 15-year trap. If Xavier pulls that trigger now, his innocent mother will be utterly destroyed by the morning news cycle. It proves a terrifying reality about deception. A lie constructed with enough malice can become a psychological cage far stronger than any iron cell. Kane is functioning on pure sociopathy in this pivotal scene. He genuinely believes Xavier values his public reputation more than avenging his father's blood. Lower the gun, walk me to a doctor, and the file disappears. The old man murmurs over the howling storm. His asking price for silence is the entire Brooklyn territory. Stares down at him, his face an impenetrable mask. Then, a microscopic smile cracks through his icy detachment. He looks at the bleeding tyrant and calmly states that his father taught him one crucial thing about snakes. You never negotiate because they only know how to bite. Before Kane can even process his impending doom, the wail of police sirens shatters the night sky. The underlying lesson here is brilliantly clear. You can never cure a toxic predator by simply offering to feed it. Harsh strobes of blue and red begin painting the choppy water of the harbor. This massive federal raid, secretly orchestrated by Xavier, is crashing down 12 minutes ahead of schedule. Kane panics, his eyes darting wildly toward the screaming sirens. It is the ultimate fatal mistake for a lifelong killer, taking his eyes off the immediate threat standing right in front of him. His bloody hand twitches in a desperate grab for his dropped weapon. For the very first time, genuine fear cracks his untouchable exterior. Xavier offers no second chances. Without a single blink of hesitation, he squeezes his trigger. The heavy kinetic force snaps the old crime boss's head violently backward, ending his toxic reign permanently. The truth of survival is stark. The exact moment you look away from your present danger is the moment you lose everything. The tyrant who built his empire on human suffering simply slumps sideways. His heavy gold ring catches the flashing police strobes one last time before his chest stops moving. Watch Xavier's physical reaction closely as he drops to his knees. There is absolutely zero panic, no dramatic breakdown, and no screaming at the rain. He calmly reaches into the dead man's blood-soaked collar and yanks out a thin silver chain. At the end dangles a tiny brass key, the physical anchor to decades of torment. Xavier closes his fist around the cold metal, tucks it into his coat, and slowly turns his back on the corpse. This moment teaches us a profound truth. True peace does not come from explosive vengeance, but from quietly walking away with the power that was stolen from you. The first federal cruiser launches violently over the seawall, and tactical teams swarm the rotting docks. You and I need to appreciate the absolute brilliance of this frame. By the time the police kick in the doors, Xavier and his bleeding crew are standing perfectly still, playing the role of helpless victims. Their weapons are kicked away, hands raised peacefully in the pouring rain. Xavier laid the psychological trap an hour ago with an anonymous tip. When the authorities arrive, his manufactured truth is already locked in their minds. They genuinely believe they are solving a crime. This shows us an important truth about influence. True power is often entirely invisible. Patiently letting others believe they are the ones pulling the strings. This scene is a masterclass in distorting reality. The official narrative is absolutely bulletproof. According to the arriving agents, Victor Kane went rogue, kidnapped an innocent child, and Xavier was the brave citizen who chased him down. Those dead bodies scattered on the wet planks? The police write it off as a sloppy, friendly fire incident among Kane's own men. The boy is safe, the mother weeps with relief, and Xavier walks out of the shadows looking like a savior. The authorities swallow the lie whole before dawn. Even Elena Voss realizes she has lost the board, surrendering without a single trick. This leaves us with an important life lesson about truth. History is rarely written by the righteous. It is carefully composed by those who direct the narrative. There is a chilling rhythm to how a criminal world breaks apart. You might expect loyalty to hold firm, but fear always wins. The camera finds Elena shivering under the harsh lights of an interrogation room, shaking as she trades secrets to survive. Sebastian is violently dragged from a first-class flight to Frankfurt. Then we see Daniel Cross. Madness completely takes him as he fires blindly at the tactical team, falling shattered on his kitchen floor. The coldest frame belongs to Marco. The pale monitor light catches his empty face as he reads the bloody report of Daniel's death, hits delete, and coldly moves on. This offers a brutal lesson for anyone chasing pure ambition. In the blind hunger for control, the first thing we sacrifice is always our own human soul. The heavy iron gates of the rival estate swing open for a ghost. Camila walks into the stronghold entirely alone. There are no guards beside her. She simply clutches a leather bag and a manila envelope tight to her chest. Inside the silent chapel, dust dances in the pale light while Donna Lucia waits in the shadows. Camila collapses onto a wooden pew. The camera lingers on her hollow eyes, completely drained by decades of torment from a toxic husband. She stares at the stone altar, her voice barely a whisper as she confesses how deeply tired she is. She just wants to vanish into the quiet. It shows us a profound truth about the battles we fight in life. Sometimes our greatest victory is not destroying our enemies, but having the quiet courage to walk away and finally breathe. Donna Lucia lowers her chin, offering a slow nod to accept this irreversible shift. Camila reaches into her bag, sliding a battered envelope across the mahogany. Inside rests the holy grail of her dead husband's empire, a notebook bleeding with offshore routing numbers and purchased politicians. Camila is surrendering the keys to a kingdom of ghosts. Looking the matriarch directly in the eye, she confesses she has no fight left in her veins. "Take it," she whispers. Donna Lucia presses her hand against the paper, sealing the transfer. By noon, the legendary syndicate is entirely swallowed by the dark. The lesson here is brutal, but deeply necessary for us to grasp. True worldly power rarely ends in an epic blaze of glory, but it almost always ends in a quiet, desperate plea for peace. Let us pause the frame right here, you and I, and examine the lighting in this dining room. The morning sun washes over the exact table where executions were ordered just days ago. But look closely. Little Sophia is swimming in the oversized leather chair. The impossible truth is that Donna Lucia, a hardened matriarch who has not served a soul in 30 years, stands at the stove stirring hot cocoa for a child. In the background, Maria weeps into her clean pink cardigan. It is the heavy sobbing that only escapes when you finally realize the monster is dead. This stunning visual irony holds a beautiful truth about our own healing. Sometimes, the very places soaked in our darkest tragedies are exactly where we must sit down, drink a warm cup, and force ourselves to start over again. The camera pushes in as Xavier steps from the shadows looking utterly shattered. A butterfly bandage cuts across his jaw, his eye is painted in bruised purples, and for the first time his hands are completely empty. Before the tension even registers, little Sophia flies across the cold marble and buries face deep into his stomach. Watch the subtle twitch in Xavier's jaw. Here is an apex predator, a man who spent 37 years operating as a human weapon, completely short-circuiting. He cannot process the warmth. His mind simply freezes. It is a heartbreakingly beautiful scene that mirrors a raw truth we all eventually face. You can spend your life building the thickest, coldest armor imaginable, but pure, unearned affection will slice right through it every single time. Count the silent beats in this frame. 1, 2, 3. For 3 agonizing seconds, Xavier's scarred hands hover over the trembling child. He looks like a man trying to recall a dead language. Then, with a stiffness that physically aches to witness, the iron wall finally crumbles. He rests a heavy palm on her hair and awkwardly pulls her close. In the background, Donna Lucia presses a hand to her mouth in shock. But the peace is fleeting. Marco shatters the silence, bursting through the doors with business. $5 million of blood money has just been quietly rerouted into the orphanage accounts. It is a sharp reminder of how perfectly ironic life can be. We learn that often, the hands stained with the darkest dirt are the exact ones forced to cultivate the most beautiful gardens. Xavier stares down at this little girl, and the camera lingers as the revelation hits him. His ruthless father would actually be proud of him for surrendering to love. She is the anchor keeping him from drowning in inherited poison. The scene cuts, and 6 months bleed away. Autumn light paints the courtyard in rust and gold. The fountain runs dry, and Sophia is quietly watering a bonsai tree. The atmosphere has mutated from a war zone into a softly lit haven. Maria walks openly in the daylight. No longer a phantom in the midnight kitchen. The underlying message here is profoundly grounding. When your universe shatters, you do not heal in one dramatic moment. You heal slowly by folding the laundry, tending the plants, and fully embracing the quiet, boring beauty of ordinary days. Stick with me on this next shot to examine the emotional fallout. Constance surrenders her post, and Maria is handed the brass keys to the kitchen. She wears the crisp, legitimate uniform, yet the lens traps her sobbing alone in the pantry. Why cry now, when she is finally safe? Because when a body runs on pure terror for years, the nervous system eventually demands a reckoning. These are not tears of fear, but the exhausting tears of a survivor. Meanwhile, Sophia skips off to an elite academy, bankrolled by a charity laundering Mafia money. The script corners us with an uncomfortable reality. If you dig deeply enough beneath the floorboards of anyone's perfectly secure life, you will almost always find a few buried skeletons footing the bill. Watch how the light catches the ragged bear Sophia clutches on her walk to school. Donna Lucia actually sat in the dim light and stitched its torn stomach shut with mismatched thread. It is a beautiful metaphor for how shattered things are awkwardly pieced back together. The most jarring transformation belongs to Xavier. The man who orchestrated executions is now multiplying charity budgets and haunting the pews of a silent church. He is dragging his violent lieutenants away from the gutters and forcing them into legitimate real estate. His men despise it, hungering for the old bloody glory. This reveals a grueling truth about genuine redemption. You cannot just whisper an apology and wash your hands. True penance demands you sink your fingers back into the dirt to fix the rot you created. Look closely at how the director frames this moment. The soldiers quiet down now that clean money flows without the paranoia of federal wiretaps. We see a lethal crime boss sinking into a velvet armchair, reading quietly to a child clutching a torn toy. Then, the silence snaps. Sophia asks the impossible question. If he had just listened to her at dinner, would all that blood still have been spilled? A weaker film would let him lie here. Instead, Xavier freezes. The camera lingers on the heavy sorrow in his eyes as he speaks the brutal truth. Yes, people died because of his fragile ego. That is the sharpest blade any of us can ever swallow. You cannot step into the light until you look your absolute worst mistakes dead in the eye, and finally claim them. Let us unpack this next exchange together, you and I, because it completely flips the story on its head. This feared warlord confesses his own deep ignorance. He explains that closing his mouth and truly listening requires vastly more power than dominating a room with fear. The harsh lighting catches the silver hairs at his temples, the physical scars of his sudden awakening. He dismantles his old philosophy, admitting that family is not bound by blood, but by the willingness to catch a bullet for someone. Sophia absorbs this, returning a quiet strike of her own. A lie remains a lie, even if the whole world cheers for it. The screenwriters masterfully strip away his illusion of control. It leaves us with a vital lesson. The people we quickly dismiss as weak or naive often carry the most crushing and undeniable wisdom. Notice the brilliant framing in the background as the healing begins. Hidden in the shadows, Donna Lucia quietly wipes a tear from her cheek, watching generations of toxic poison turn to ash. Later, Xavier stares out through the bulletproof glass of his office. On the front lawn, Sophia and Maria are chasing each other through the dead autumn leaves in pure chaos. Maria is laughing so fiercely she cannot catch her breath, finally unshackled from the terror of her past. Xavier watches their joy, standing like a ghost in his own fortress. He realizes that true laughter has not echoed through these cold walls in 30 bloody years. It shows us a beautiful, simple truth. The moment you lay down your weapons and refuse to play the villain, you naturally become the savior for everyone around you. Good. Right on cue, the old darkness tries to pull him back. Marco the enforcer breaches the room, clutching a thick folder of syndicate business. Xavier glances down at the ledgers, then slowly lifts his eyes back to the bright window where the children play. With a heavy, but exhausted wave of his hand, he dismisses his entire empire. He tells Marco to leave it until tomorrow, whispering that for tonight, he just wants to be a normal man. In that breathtaking exhale, the ruthless kingpin dies. Good. As Marco retreats and the screen fades to black, the grand irony hangs heavy in the room. A tiny girl holding a stitched-up bear pierced through a darkness that a family of hardened killers were blind to. Life carries a strange poetry. Good. The soul that forces you to walk into the light is almost always the quiet one you never saw coming. Good. Before the curtain falls on this analysis, I want you to look at your own reflection. What destructive cycles do you need to break before the credits roll on your own story? If breaking down this film resonated with you today, hit that like button. Good. Share this video with a friend who might need a push toward the light, and subscribe so we can continue examining these narratives together. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had an unlikely soul step into the shadows to protect you? Good. Or were you the one forced to speak the hard truth when everyone else was paralyzed by fear? I genuinely read every single one of your stories. May you all find the kind of unfiltered peace that finally resurrected this cold estate. Keep your eyes sharp. Good. Protect the people you love, and I will see you in the next frame.
Xavier begins the story as a man surrounded by influence. Senators, judges, wealthy guests, and powerful families all gather around him. He is expected to look strong, calm, and untouchable. But his first decision shows a weakness many leaders have. He cares too much about how others see him. When Sophia warns him not to eat the poisoned food, Xavier does not immediately protect himself or investigate. Instead, he worries about reputation. He eats the food to prove that he is not afraid. This nearly costs him his life. The educational lesson here is very important. Leadership is not performance. Leadership is responsibility. A true leader does not ignore warnings because they come from someone poor, young, or powerless. A true leader does not protect pride at the expense of safety. A true leader listens, examines, and acts wisely. Xavier only becomes a better man when he learns to value Sophia's voice over the opinions of powerful guests. This applies to schools, families, businesses, and society. Teachers must listen to quiet students. Parents must listen when children express fear. Managers must listen to junior employees. Leaders must understand that wisdom can come from anywhere. The story also shows that leadership requires humility. Xavier apologizes to Sophia. This is one of the most meaningful moments in the story because powerful people rarely admit mistakes. His apology does not make him weaker. It makes him more human. By the end, Xavier chooses protection over pride. He risks himself to save Sophia, because she once risked everything to save him. That is real leadership. The lesson is clear. The strongest leader is not the one who impresses the powerful, but the one who protects the vulnerable.